The rain had stopped just as Ethan Cole stepped out of the car. The hospital lights glowed pale against the night, humming softly like they were breathing on their own. He pulled his coat tighter, not because it was cold, but because no one knew he was here. No assistance. No driver waiting. Just him and the quiet weight in his chest that money had never learned how to lift. Inside, the smell of antiseptic wrapped around him. A distant monitor beeped. Somewhere, someone coughed. Ethan paused at the sliding doors, hand hovering, as if crossing this line might change more than he was ready to face.
You have to rest now.
Before the story carries us any further, I want to pause with you for a moment. As you're listening right now, where are you in the world? It still amazes me how one quiet story can reach so many hearts at once. Share your city or country below.
Please,
let's see how far this moment travels together.
Ethan
signed in under a false name. He always did. Fame was loud, and tonight demanded silence. The receptionist barely looked up, her eyes tired, her smile practiced. "Third floor," she said gently, as if sensing he didn't need directions, just permission. The elevator ride felt longer than it should have. The mirror reflected a man in his early 40s, clean suit, expensive watch, eyes that looked older than his face. Ethan had built a tech empire before 30. Headlines called him brilliant, ruthless, but none of them knew about the nights like this, when success felt hollow, when he needed to see something real to remind himself he was still human. The doors opened to a quiet hallway, dim lights. A janitor pushing a cart, humming off-key. Ethan walked slowly, reading room numbers he didn't recognize, past doors that held lives paused mid-sentence. He hadn't come with a plan. No donation announcement. No photo op. He just needed to feel something true. A soft voice drifted from an open doorway. "It's okay, Mom. I'm right here." Ethan stopped. Inside the room, a young woman sat beside a hospital bed, her back slightly hunched. One hand wrapped around an older woman's frail fingers. The older woman slept fitfully, chest rising unevenly. The daughter, maybe mid-20s, looked exhausted. Dark circles. Hair tied back with care that had long run out. Ethan didn't mean to stare, but something about the stillness pulled him in. A nurse entered quietly, adjusting the floor. "She's stable for now," she whispered, "but visiting hours." "I know," the daughter said softly. "I'll step out soon." The nurse nodded, eyes kind, and left. The daughter stayed. She leaned closer to her mother and whispered something Ethan couldn't hear. Her voice cracked anyway. Tears slid down her cheek, unnoticed, like she'd cried so much her body had stopped asking permission. Ethan felt something twist inside him. He turned to leave. This wasn't his place. But the daughter stood suddenly and stepped into the hall, nearly bumping into him. "Oh, sorry," she said, startled. "No, my fault," Ethan replied quickly. They stood there awkwardly. Silence stretched. The daughter wiped her face, embarrassed. "She's my mom," she said, as if explaining herself. "She hates hospitals. I promised I'd stay." Ethan nodded. "You don't have to explain." She studied him for a second. "Are you family?" "No," he said. "Just visiting." She smiled faintly. "That's kind of you." The word landed strangely on him. They sat on the bench outside the room. The hallway buzzed softly with distant machines. Her name was Lily. She worked 2 jobs. Her mom, Grace, had been admitted after collapsing at work. No insurance. Long nights, longer fears. Ethan listened more than he spoke. He found himself leaning in, like the sound of her voice mattered. "I don't know what I'll do if..." Lily stopped. "Sorry, I'm not supposed to dump this on strangers." "It's okay," Ethan said. And for once, he meant it without trying to fix anything. A doctor passed, then another nurse. Time moved oddly here, too fast and too slow. Eventually Lily stood. "I should go get some water." When she left, Ethan looked through the glass at Grace. Her face was peaceful now, almost childlike. A woman who'd lived a full life reduced to a fragile breath. Ethan thought of his own mother. Gone years ago. He hadn't been there at the end, too busy closing a deal in Tokyo. He'd told himself she'd understand. He wasn't sure anymore.
It's important.
Lily returned, surprised to find him still there.
Right away.
You don't have to wait, she said. I know, he replied. I want to. She nodded, eyes softening. Something unspoken passed between them. And in that quiet hallway, surrounded by strangers and humming lights, Ethan felt the first crack in the armor he'd worn for decades. Not because of tragedy alone, but because of the simple, fierce love of a daughter who refused to leave her mother's side. He didn't know it yet, but this night, this unnoticed moment, was already reshaping him from the inside out. Ethan stayed longer than he expected. Long enough for the hallway clock to tick past midnight. Long enough for Lily to doze off in the chair beside her mother's bed, her head tilted awkwardly, fingers still laced with graces. The room was dim except for the steady glow of monitors, their soft beeping like a fragile promise that life was still holding on. Ethan stood near the window, hands in his pockets, watching the reflection of the three of them layered over the city lights outside. A strange thought crossed his mind. How none of his boardrooms, penthouses, or private jets had ever felt this heavy or this honest. A nurse returned quietly. She glanced at Lily, asleep, then at Ethan. Is she with you?
You have to rest now.
Ethan whispered,
crucial.
But she shouldn't be alone. The nurse nodded, understanding more than he'd said. I'll bring a blanket. When Lily stirred and realized a blanket had been tucked around her shoulders, her eyes widened. She looked at Ethan. You didn't have to, she said softly. I know, he replied, but sometimes people do things because they can. Her throat tightened. She looked away, blinking fast. Thank you. It was a small kindness. Barely anything really. Yet Ethan felt it land somewhere deep, like the first stone dropped into still water. If you were standing there in that hallway, watching a stranger quietly care for someone else, what would you have done? Would you step closer, or keep walking? Share your honest answer in the comments.
It's absolutely
and
crucial.
If this moment stirred something in you, tap like, not for the story, but to show that compassion still counts. Lily eventually insisted Ethan go. You've already stayed too long, she said with a tired smile.
Please, it's
Whoever
important.
You're waiting for, they'll understand.
We need to discuss your treatment
Ethan
options
hesitated,
right away.
Yes,
then
it's
nodded.
crucial we decide
I
on the
hope
next
so.
steps.
Are you feeling
As he
up
walked
to it?
away, he slipped a card from his wallet, not the one with his company logo, just his name and number. He left it at the nurse's station with a quiet request. If they need anything tonight, call me. The nurse raised an eyebrow. Ethan met her gaze evenly. She nodded once. Outside, the rain had started again. Ethan sat in his car for a long time before turning the key. He didn't feel lighter, but something inside him had shifted, like a door left slightly open. The next morning, his phone rang before sunrise. Mr. Cole, the nurse said, Grace needs a procedure.
You have to tell me
Insurance
the truth
won't
now.
cover
I
it.
can't.
The daughter, she's trying to
Please,
figure
it's
it out.
important.
Ethan didn't ask
We
how
need
much.
to discuss your treatment
He
options
just
right
said,
away.
I'm
Yes,
on my
it's
way.
crucial we decide
By
on
the
the next
time
steps.
Lily
Are you
arrived at the
feeling up
billing
to it?
office, eyes red, hands shaking, the paperwork was already stamped and approved. I don't understand, she said, voice breaking. They said it's handled. The clerk smiled kindly. Someone took care of it. Lily's heart pounded as she walked back into the hallway and saw Ethan standing there, holding 2 cups of coffee like he belonged. You, she whispered. He shrugged lightly.
You have to rest now.
You look
It's
like you could use
absolutely
caffeine.
crucial. I understand.
Her emotions crashed all at once. Relief, confusion, gratitude, fear. Why would you do this for us? Ethan searched
have
for the
to tell
right
me the
answer.
truth now.
None
I
felt
can't.
big enough. Because
Please,
no one
it's
should have to
important.
choose between love and
We
money.
need to discuss your treatment
Tears spilled
options right
freely
away.
now.
Yes, it's
Lily
crucial we
covered her
decide on
mouth,
the next steps.
shaking her
Are you
head.
feeling up to it?
You don't even know us. Maybe, he said gently, but I know what it feels like to wish someone had shown up. They sat together again. The procedure went smoothly. Grace was stable. For the first time in days, Lily allowed herself to breathe. Over the next week, Ethan kept coming back. Never announced. Never stayed long. He brought soup once. Paid a utility bill another
You
time.
have to rest now.
Fixed
It's
nothing with
absolutely
speeches,
crucial.
only
I
presence.
understand.
And slowly, Lily began to talk. About her childhood. About how her mother worked herself sick to raise her. About dreams deferred and fears she never said out loud. Ethan listened. One afternoon, Lily finally asked, "What do you do, really?" He smiled faintly. "I build things. Or I used to think I did. She laughed softly, then grew serious. You don't act like someone who's used to being thanked. I'm not, he admitted. What Lily didn't know, what Ethan hadn't said, was that every visit cracked something deeper inside him. Each quiet hour in that hospital stripped away the armor he'd polished for years. He started canceling meetings, ignoring emails, watching the world slow down in the reflection of a hospital window. One night, as Grace slept peacefully, Lily turned to him. You remind me of someone. Who? My mom, she said. She helped people quietly. Never wanted credit. Ethan felt his chest tighten. No one had ever said that about him. He drove home that night and stared at the city from his penthouse. For the first time, it felt unbearably empty. Because once you witness real love up close, pretending feels impossible. Ethan began coming to the hospital without checking his watch. That was new. Days blended into each other in ways he wasn't used to, measured not by meetings or market swings, but by Grace's breathing, by Lily's exhaustion, by the subtle hope that crept in every morning when the sun slipped through the thin hospital curtains. Ethan found himself noticing details he'd ignored his whole life. The way nurses spoke in softer tones at night, how Lily always fixed her mother's blanket before sitting down, how silence could feel heavier than noise. One afternoon, while Grace slept, Lily stood by the window stretching her stiff arms. I used to hate places like this, she said quietly. They remind you how little control you actually have. Ethan nodded. Control is an illusion, he said, surprising himself. I built my whole life chasing it. She turned to him. And it never stayed. Lily studied him, not with curiosity this time, but recognition. You talk like someone who's lost something important. Ethan didn't answer right away. His mind drifted to his childhood home. To long dinners eaten alone while his parents worked late. To the way success became his language for love. To his mother's voicemail, the one he never returned before she passed. I think I lost myself somewhere, he said finally. Lily didn't push. She just nodded. Sometimes understanding didn't need words. Have you ever had someone step in for you when you felt completely alone? If yes, type yes and share their name in the comments. Sometimes gratitude deserves to be spoken, even late. Grace's recovery was slow but steady. Physical therapy began. Lily returned to work, though Ethan insisted on driving her when he could. They didn't talk about money anymore. It sat quietly between them, unspoken, like something sacred that didn't need explanation. But outside that hospital bubble, Ethan's world was unraveling. His assistant left voicemails he didn't return. Board members grew restless. Headlines whispered about missed appearances and delayed launches. The empire he'd built so carefully began to wobble, and for the first time, Ethan didn't rush to stabilize it. One evening, his business partner Michael showed up unannounced at Ethan's penthouse. You vanished, Michael said, frustration barely hidden. Do you know what people are saying? Ethan poured 2 glasses of water instead of wine. Let them talk. Michael stared. This isn't like you. You don't just disappear. Ethan leaned against the counter. Maybe that's the problem. Michael exhaled sharply. You worked your whole life for this. And somehow, Ethan replied, I missed everything else. Michael shook his head. You're risking everything. Ethan looked out at the city, so bright, so distant. No, he said softly. I think I finally understand what I've been losing. The next morning, Ethan arrived at the hospital to find Lily arguing with a doctor in the hallway. She needs more time, Lily insisted, voice shaking. She's not ready. I understand, the doctor said calmly. But insurance. Ethan stepped forward. She stays. The doctor glanced at him. Sir, I'll handle it. Lily turned eyes wide. Ethan, no. You've already done too much. He met her gaze gently. I'm not doing this for you, he said. I'm doing it because it's right. Something shifted between them then. Not gratitude, not obligation, but trust. Later that day, Grace woke up more alert than she had in weeks. She looked at Ethan, confusion flickering across her face. You're the man Lily keeps talking about, she said weakly. Ethan smiled. Only good things, I hope. Grace squeezed his hand with surprising strength. You remind me of my husband, she whispered. He helped quietly too. Ethan swallowed hard. Grace studied him carefully. Whatever you're running from, she said, it'll catch you eventually. Best to turn around and face it. Those words followed him long after he left the room. That night, alone again in his penthouse, Ethan sat on the floor, suit jacket discarded, tie loosened, phone buzzing unanswered nearby. For the first time in years, he didn't feel powerful. He felt exposed. And strangely, relieved. Because deep down, Ethan knew this wasn't just about Lily or Grace or one hospital visit. It was about the man he'd become, and the man he still had time to be. But facing that truth would require something he'd avoided his entire life. Letting go. Ethan began to change his routine in ways no one around him understood. He traded tailored suits for simple shirts. Morning meetings for early walks. He started taking the long way to places, as if distance itself might teach him something. At the hospital, staff no longer looked surprised when they saw him. He wasn't the man who paid the bills anymore. He was just Ethan. The one who brought soup. The one who listened. Grace's strength returned in quiet increments. A longer walk. A steadier hand. A smile that lasted a few seconds more than yesterday. Lily noticed everything, recording progress like small miracles she was afraid might disappear if she didn't acknowledge them. One afternoon, while Grace slept after physical therapy, Lily and Ethan sat near the vending machines, sharing a bag of pretzels. You don't talk much about your family, Lily said casually. Ethan stared at the pretzels in his hand. There's not much to say. She waited. My father was distant. My mother tried to hold everything together, he continued. I thought success would make them proud. Turns out, it just made me busy. Lily nodded slowly. My mom always said being present mattered more than being impressive. Ethan smiled faintly. She's right. A woman nearby struggled to lift her child into a wheelchair. Without thinking, Ethan stood and helped. No hesitation. No glance around to see who noticed. Lily watched him, something warm and sad flickering in her eyes. Now let me ask you something, right here, right now. What's one small act of kindness you've done recently, even if no one saw it? Share it below so others can remember that goodness still exists. Your story might be the light someone else needs tonight. The days grew heavier outside the hospital. Michael called again. Then the board. Then investors. Ethan ignored them all until one voicemail finally stopped him cold. You're destroying everything we built, Michael said. If you don't show up tomorrow, the board will vote without you. Ethan listened to the message twice. Then deleted it. That night, Lily found him sitting alone in Grace's room, lights dimmed, just watching the slow rise and fall of her chest. You okay? She asked. I don't know, he said honestly. She sat beside him. You don't have to carry everything alone. He exhaled. I don't know how not to. She placed her hand over his. You're learning. The next morning, Ethan made a decision he'd avoided for weeks. He showed up to the board meeting. The room felt colder than he remembered. Suits. Sharp eyes. Polite hostility. Michael wouldn't meet his gaze. Ethan stood at the head of the table and spoke without slides, without numbers. I've spent my life building systems that scale, he said. But I failed to build a life that mattered. Murmurs rippled. I'm stepping down as CEO, he continued. Effective immediately. Silence slammed into the room. Michael stared. You can't be serious. I am, Ethan replied calmly. This company doesn't need me anymore. But someone else does. The vote never happened. When Ethan returned to the hospital later that day, Lily knew something was different the moment she saw his face. What happened? She asked. I walked away, he said simply. Her eyes widened. From everything? He nodded. From the version of me that didn't know how to stay. Tears filled her eyes. That's terrifying. It is, he agreed. But it's also the first honest thing I've done in a long time. Grace woke that evening and listened quietly as Lily explained. When Ethan finished, Grace reached for his hand. Then you're finally rich, she said. Ethan blinked. I just gave up billions. Grace smiled weakly. "No," she whispered. "You gain time." That night, Ethan sat in the hospital chapel alone. No prayers spoken. Just silence and the steady hum of the building around him. For the first time, he wasn't running. He was staying. And he didn't yet know that the hardest moment, the one that would test everything he'd learned, was still waiting just ahead. The call came at 2:17 a.m. Ethan was asleep in the chair beside Grace's bed, head tilted back, spine aching in a way he didn't bother to notice anymore. Lily jolted awake at the same time his phone vibrated softly in his hand. For a second, neither of them moved. The hospital room felt suspended, too quiet, too still. Then Grace coughed. It was small but wrong. Shallow. Lily was on her feet instantly, pressing the call button with shaking fingers. "Mom." Her voice cracked. "Mom, I'm here." The nurse rushed in, followed quickly by another. Then a doctor. The room filled with movement, clipped voices, urgent hands. Ethan stepped back instinctively, heart pounding, not with fear of loss, but with the terrible realization of how much he now had to lose. "Ms. Harper," the doctor said gently, pulling Lily aside. "We're doing everything we can, but there are complications." Lily's knees nearly gave out. Ethan caught her without thinking, his arms steady around her shoulders. "Please," Lily whispered. "She's fought so hard." The doctor nodded, eyes soft. "So have you." They waited outside the room, the hum of machines muffled behind closed doors. Lily pressed her forehead into Ethan's chest, sobbing quietly, like she didn't want to disturb the world any more than it already was. "I'm not ready," she said through tears. "I can't do this without her." Ethan held her tighter. "You won't be alone," he said, words that felt like a vow, even though he didn't know what tomorrow held. Minutes stretched into something unbearable. Every sound made Lily flinch. Every silence felt like an answer she didn't want. Finally, the doctor emerged. "She's stable," he said. "But the next few hours are critical." Lily collapsed into a chair, relief and fear tangling so tightly it left her shaking. Ethan knelt in front of her, meeting her eyes. "She's still here," he said softly. Lily nodded, tears streaming freely now. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered, "for staying." Ethan shook his head. "Don't. This is where I'm supposed to be." When they were allowed back in, Grace was pale but conscious. Her eyes fluttered open and found Lily's face. "Hey," Grace murmured weakly. "You look tired." Lily laughed through tears. "You scared me." Grace's gaze drifted to Ethan. She smiled faintly. "You stayed." "Yes," Ethan said, his voice unsteady. "I did." Grace squeezed his hand again, her strength fading but her clarity sharp. "Then promise me something." "Anything," he said without hesitation. "Don't leave the people who show you who you really are." Ethan felt his throat close. He nodded once, unable to speak. If that moment touched something deep in your chest, leave a red heart in the comments. Sometimes a simple symbol can carry the weight of feelings words can't hold. The night passed slowly, but Grace held on. By morning, her breathing had steadied again. Exhaustion finally claimed Lily, and she slept curled up in the chair, her hands still resting on her mother's arm. Ethan watched them both, something aching and beautiful swelling inside him. He realized then that this wasn't just about saving Grace. It was about saving himself from the man he used to be, the one who always chose distance over devotion, ambition over presence. As sunlight crept through the blinds, Ethan stood and quietly stepped into the hallway. He leaned against the wall, closing his eyes. For the first time in years, he felt pain without trying to outrun it. And he welcomed it. Because pain meant he was finally alive. Mourning didn't bring peace. It brought consequences. Ethan's phone, forgotten for hours, buzzed relentlessly in his pocket as he stood by the hospital window watching the city wake up. Missed calls. Messages stacked on messages. News alerts flashing fragments of a life he'd stepped away from but hadn't escaped. Tech billionaire abruptly resigns. Board in turmoil. Insiders call decision reckless. He turned the screen off. Behind him, Lily stirred awake. She blinked, disoriented, then rushed to her mother's bedside. Grace was still sleeping, her breathing shallow but steady. "She made it through the night," Ethan said quietly. Lily exhaled, hand over her mouth. "Thank God." They stood there together, shoulder to shoulder, silence filled with gratitude and fear. Then Lily noticed his phone clenched in his hand. "Everything okay?" she asked. Ethan hesitated. This was the part of his life he'd kept sealed, clean, polished, untouchable. "I walked away from something big," he said carefully. "And now it's fighting back." Lily looked at him. "Do you regret it?" He searched himself honestly. "I regret the years I waited to do it." Later that day, Michael showed up at the hospital. Ethan saw him first, his reflection stiffening in the glass before the man himself appeared at the end of the hallway, anger barely contained behind a professional smile. "We need to talk," Michael said sharply. "Not here," Ethan replied. Michael glanced at Lily, then back at Ethan. 5 minutes. They stepped outside. The air was sharp, cold enough to sting. "You humiliated me," Michael snapped. "You humiliated the company." Ethan stayed calm. "That wasn't my intention." "You left us," Michael shot back. "After everything we built together." Ethan nodded slowly. "I know. And I'm sorry for the way I did it. But I'm not sorry for leaving." Michael scoffed. "You're throwing away your legacy for strangers." "No," Ethan said firmly. "I was throwing away my life to protect a legacy that didn't love me back." Michael stared at him, searching for the man he used to know. "You've changed." "Yes," Ethan said. "I finally have." Michael's voice softened just a little. "You think walking away fixes what you broke?" Ethan met his eyes. "No. But staying was breaking me." They stood there, years of friendship and resentment hanging between them. Be honest with yourself for a moment. Could you forgive someone who chose their own healing over your expectations? Type "forgive" if you think you could, or "never" if it would cut too deep. Michael exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I don't understand you anymore." Ethan nodded. "I know. But I hope one day, you will." Michael turned and walked away without another word. Back inside, Lily noticed Ethan's hands shaking slightly. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," he said, surprising himself by meaning it. "That was something I needed to face." Grace woke later that afternoon, more alert than before. She motioned for Ethan to come closer. "You look lighter," she murmured. Ethan smiled faintly. "I faced an old ghost." Grace nodded knowingly. Forgiveness doesn't always mean going back. Sometimes it means letting go without bitterness. Those words stayed with him. Days passed. Grace improved enough to move out of intensive care. Lily laughed more. The hospital room felt less like a waiting place and more like a bridge to something new. Ethan began volunteering quietly, no cameras, no announcements. He paid off a stranger's medical bill. Sat with a man who had no visitors. Read stories to a child who missed home. Each act stripped away another layer of the man he used to be. One evening, Lily found him helping an elderly patient eat dinner. "You don't have to do all this," she said softly. He smiled. "I get to." She studied him for a long moment. "You know, most people with your kind of power would never give this up." Ethan wiped his hands and looked at her. "Power never made me feel useful. This does." Lily swallowed, emotion rising. "My mom always said people show you who they are when no one's watching." Ethan met her gaze. "Then I hope I'm finally worth watching." As night fell, Ethan sat alone again, not in the chapel this time, but in the hallway where he'd first met Lily. The place where everything changed. He realized something then: redemption wasn't loud. It didn't arrive with applause. It arrived quietly, when you chose to stay, even when walking away would be easier. And the final test of that choice was still ahead. Grace was discharged on a quiet Thursday morning. No balloons. No dramatic announcements. Just a nurse smiling as she handed Lily a stack of papers, and Grace slowly standing up on her own for the first time in weeks. Ethan hovered close, ready to catch her if she wobbled, but she didn't. "I told you," Grace said with a weak grin. "I'm stubborn." Lily laughed, wiping her eyes. "You're impossible." Ethan watched them, something warm settling deep in his chest. This was the victory he'd never known how to chase before. Not a headline. Not a number. Just a woman walking out of a hospital because love had refused to give up. Outside, the sunlight felt different. Softer. Honest. They helped Grace into the car. Lily climbed into the back seat beside her mother, still half afraid this was a dream that might end too soon. Ethan took the driver's seat, hands steady on the wheel. As he pulled away from the hospital, he caught his reflection in the rearview mirror. He barely recognized himself. Not because he looked different, but because for the first time, his eyes weren't restless. Grace moved into Lily's small apartment. It wasn't much. Worn couch. Cracked tiles. But it was home. Ethan insisted on helping, fixing the leaky sink, carrying groceries, setting up a small desk by the window where Grace could sit and rest. "You don't have to keep saving us," Lily said one evening as they unpacked boxes. Ethan paused. "I'm not saving anyone," he said gently. "I'm building something with you." The words surprised them both. Days turned into weeks. Grace grew stronger. Lily laughed more easily. And Ethan found himself learning how to exist without urgency. He cooked poorly, burned toast, learned Grace's medication schedule better than his old calendar of meetings. One afternoon, while Grace napped, Lily and Ethan sat on the fire escape, watching the city breathe. "What will you do now?" Lily asked quietly. Ethan considered the question. "I don't know yet, but I know what I won't do." She smiled. "That sounds like a start." That evening, Ethan received an email from a journalist. Then another. Word had spread, quietly at first, about the former millionaire spending his time at hospitals, shelters, places without cameras. They wanted interviews, statements, explanations. Ethan deleted them all. Instead, he did something else. He set up a small foundation, not in his name, not public. Just a quiet network that helped families like Lily's navigate medical crises without drowning. No press releases. No branding. Just help where it was needed. Grace found out weeks later. "You did all this without telling anyone?" she asked, eyes wide. Ethan smiled sheepishly. "I learned from the best." Grace reached for his hand, her grip warm and steady. "Then promise me one more thing." He leaned closer. "Anything. Don't disappear from your own life again." He nodded, emotion thick in his chest. "I promise." That night, Lily stood in the doorway of her room, watching Ethan help her mother prepare tea. "You're different," she said softly. Ethan looked at her. "So are you." She smiled. "I think we both needed this." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped closer, careful, as if the moment itself were fragile. "I don't know what tomorrow looks like," he said. "But I know I don't want to face it alone." Lily's breath caught. "Me neither." They didn't rush. They didn't label anything. They just stood there, letting hope breathe between them. If you believe love still finds a way, even after broken years and wrong turns, comment below. Let's fill this space with hope. Someone reading right now might need to see it. Weeks later, Ethan returned once more to the hospital, not as a visitor, but as a volunteer coordinator helping new families find their footing. He paused in the same hallway where he'd first overheard Lily's voice weeks ago. Same lights. Same hum. Different man. He realized then that redemption wasn't about erasing the past. It was about choosing, again and again, to live differently because of it. And as he walked forward, toward a life built not on wealth, but on presence, Ethan understood something that would shape the rest of his days. The greatest transformation doesn't come from what you give up. It comes from what you finally choose to stay for. Ethan stood by the hospital entrance long after his shift ended, watching families come and go, some hopeful, some broken, all carrying something unseen. The sliding doors opened and closed with the same quiet rhythm they always had, but tonight, they felt like punctuation marks in a sentence he finally understood. Lily was waiting for him across the street, leaning against the railing with 2 cups of cheap coffee. She handed one to him without asking how he took it. She already knew. "Long day?" she asked. He nodded. "Full." They walked slowly, not toward anywhere specific. just forward. Grace was home now, resting comfortably, strong enough to complain about Lily's cooking and Ethan's terrible jokes. Life wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that made all the difference. I used to think meaning came from impact, Ethan said quietly. Big moves. Big wins. Lily glanced at him. And now? Now I think it comes from showing up, he replied. Even when no one's watching. She smiled, slipping her hand into his. He squeezed back, gentle, certain. They stopped at a corner where the city noise softened, where the street light flickered like it had a story of its own. Ethan took a breath, deeper than he used to allow himself. There's something I never told you, he said. Lily waited. When I first walked into that hospital, I wasn't there to help anyone, he admitted. I was there because I felt empty. I didn't expect to find a reason to stay. Her eyes glistened. And now, he said, voice steady, I wake up knowing exactly why I'm here. Lily stepped closer, resting her forehead against his chest. Then don't ever disappear again. I won't, he promised. And this time he knew he could keep it. The months that followed were quiet in the best way. Ethan never reclaimed his spotlight. He didn't need it. His days filled with faces, names, stories, people who didn't care who he used to be, only who he was now. Lily returned to school. Grace volunteered at a community kitchen, insisting on giving back, before anyone changed their mind. One evening, as they sat together at the small kitchen table, laughter echoing softly off chipped paint, Ethan realized something profound. He hadn't lost his old life. He'd outgrown it. And before this story fades, there's one last thing that matters. If this journey touched you, even a little, don't scroll past in silence. Tap like, not for me, but for every quiet soul who carried pain without applause and chose kindness anyway. One small click can be your way of saying, I see you. Your pain mattered. Because the truth is simple, and it's gentle. You don't need to be rich to change a life. You don't need permission to stay when someone needs you. And sometimes the most powerful thing you'll ever do is walk into a place unnoticed and walk out transformed.